another edition of the Podcast Superfriends. As we welcome, it is everybody. And we were close. Almost everybody showed up on time, but here we are. We'll go around clockwise like we're the Brady Bunch, and we'll head to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Intros.
Howdy, everybody. I am Johnny Podcast, and I am coming from Horned Frog Country. Baseball team is currently doing very well. I'm a full-time, I don't even know why we say full-time anymore. I'm a podcast producer. I focus a lot on audio and video, and I'm really excited to be here with my super friends.
Coming in with probably the most prepared Super Friends episode we've ever had. My name is Catherine O'Brien. I'm tuning in from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'm also a full-time podcast producer, and my company's called Branch Out Programs.
David Yaz in Boston, pod617.com, the Boston Podcast Network. I am a podcast producer 110% of the time, even more than full time. Happy to be here.
John Gay, Jag in Detroit Podcast. Like Johnny, I am repping my alma mater today, although I don't believe we have a baseball team, but best of luck to y'all. John Gay, Jag in Detroit Podcast. I produce podcasts, branded podcasts for businesses and nonprofits based out of the Detroit area.
Matt Kundle, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, the Sound Off Podcast Network, and we are the home of about 70 some odd podcasts, and we also make and produce a bunch of them. Thanks for everyone for being here today. There's not a lot of excitement when I sort of mention what the subject matter is, because it's a weird one and an outlier. Now, just so if you're listening to this show for the first time, we work with podcasters, and they have a lot of questions. And I think one of the questions that has come up a lot over the last year, and I went back in my notes, and it really started to ramp up in March of 2022, and that's the idea of transcription.
I'm glad one of us is taking notes.
I had to look back really to find out. And so I'll just tell my story is that I went back around that time, and I started to push in a little bit on transcription. I got into a bit of a Twitter discussion with James Cridland and Rob Greenlee, who were on stage at Podcast Evolutions. And I said, why is it that we would have to pick up the bill for transcriptions? Is it really worth it? Blah, blah, blah. And I got some pushback from James Cridland, said, you of all people should be able to cover the cost of this and find a sponsor on your podcast, of which I did find a sponsor the same day. So he was right. I could find a sponsor to cover the cost of that thing. But in that time, it has been a bit of an adventure. And one thing that we've talked a lot about and had questions from our clients. So that's why we're going to discuss this today. And that's transcriptions. But first, I want to start off with one question and just go around the table, and you can weigh in as you can here. And that's, what's the difference between captions and transcriptions? Jag.
Wow, on the hot seat. Captions are, to me, I might be wrong, so feel free to buzz me or gong me on this, but to me a caption is auto-generated, pops up on the screen as it's happening. A transcription is a preset document that has a list of what everything said. That's very useful. We'll come back to this, especially for accessibility, those who may be hard of hearing or differently abled. So to me, a caption kind of pops up automatically. A transcription is a more formal document. IMHO.
Any disagreement?
John. I wouldn't disagree. I would think that their uses are different, which is why they're titled differently. So captions are normally, at least in my experience, we're normally using captions for 15 to 1 minute long videos that we're sharing on social. That way, the reason that you're adding those on there is so combining with the visual element, or if you're doing an audiogram. But if we're doing video podcasts and we're burning on the captions on there, so it gives that person an extra excuse that they don't have to open the video, but they can stop and read what's happening. And hopefully after they read a sentence or two, they find it interesting enough to actually click onto the video and consume the rest of that little clip that we're posting, which would then hopefully drive them to listen to a full episode of the podcast, to drive them to become a full subscriber, versus, like Jag said, with people who may be hard of hearing or consume podcasts by reading them, which I would make the argument is maybe like 1% of the total listening population, which is not a percent of the population that we should discount totally. But you're reading the podcast as if it were like a blog post or an essay or a book, maybe. And that would be my kind of detailing it out a little bit more of what Jag said.
Yeah, I'll jump in and say when you caption something like an audiogram to promote your podcast, like Johnny was referencing, those are the ones when I create those, I want to make sure that the words are perfect, because those are you only got like 60 seconds or so to capture someone's attention, and they are powerful, right? When you see a captioned, TikTok video and it's got the animated words and certain words are popping, that is a persuasive way to get people into your podcast. And transcription is, you want them to be accurate, but if you were trying to produce a video podcast where you're going to edit every word and have that captioned at the bottom of the screen, that's something that's very time intensive, and I'm not sure any of us go through that level, or people want to necessarily pay for that now. But there are good services that can produce pretty accurate transcription.
Well, David, you maybe just think of it. There is one startling similarity between captions and transcriptions that we may be overlooking, and it's that they're boilerplate now. You have to have them both. Every podcast, it has a transcription element, at least somewhat, to them now, and clients and people who are hosting podcasts somewhat expect that from the people that they're working with. And if you're creating video or promotional material, audiograms, videos, having captions on there is kind of like, you sort of have to have that now. And there's just too many tools out there available, whether it's Headliner or whether it's Veed.io, which I use, that they just automatically do it in there. And if it's only a minute long, yeah, you can edit those and make them correct. They're not perfect, but it's sort of that extra step that you kind of have to take now if you want your podcast to even compete with all the other ones.
Johnny, you're saying it's table stakes to have these transcriptions. I think, and we'll get into this a little bit more as we go through this today, but there are services, as you mentioned, that will generate your transcription with AI, and I have found them generally 90-ish% accurate, depending on the service. And then it's a matter of going in and tweaking what they made, whether it's punctuation or misspelling names, things like that. I have actually recently begun paying a service that has a human person transcribing the episodes. It costs a little bit more than the AI, but to me, it was worth it to buy my time back. It was worth it as a producer. It was worth it. They range depending on the bells and whistles you need. If there's thick accents, if there's more than two people, if things of that audio, the transcription service typically range between $1 and $2 a minute for an actual person to go through and transcribe the podcast. Which, if I get a 15 or 30-minute podcast for a client, it's worth it to me to pay someone to do it, and I can skim it, copy paste it, and not spend a half an hour tweaking it, or put something generated by AI up to it that's not totally accurate.
Catherine, why should podcasters transcribe a show?
There's a couple of reasons that I would suggest. Some of them are obvious. We've talked about a little bit at the accessibility issue. That is real. People who are hard of hearing or deaf, they would like to access podcasts. And so a transcript is a great reason to do that. Accessibility. The other reason, and this one kind of has come up for some of my clients, is if you are talking about a controversial topic, you would like to have a transcript that is a record of what you actually said. Let's check the transcript and see what we actually said about this particular issue if something should come up. So that's
Objection, Your Honor.
Read it in the transcript. It's a PDF. It can't be changed, like these captions you've been talking about. Yeah, so that's a great reason to have it as a record. And then I have also found, this is one of those that, because we are in podcasts and we love podcasts, this is not for us, but some people, they're not fans of listening to podcasts, and they would much rather skim a PDF document and get the information that way. So I know I'm thinking of one client in particular. They do some materials that they expect their staff to listen to. So it's not quite an internal podcast, but there's information about the organization. And some people just aren't audio listeners. They want to be able to read something and get the same information. So those are some reasons right off the top of my head.
But Catherine, I don't want people to read the show. I want them to listen to the show.
I know, Matt. I know you want people to listen to the show, but sometimes we can't. I'm deaf. I can't. We can't choose how people want to consume our content all the time.
Fish where the fish are. Make your show available to everybody. I would assume not put shows on YouTube, but at the same time, people are going to consume shows on YouTube, so it's got to be there.
I was just going to say we're losing that battle for all the people who said I don't want to make an MP4 of my show. So Sometimes we just have to do what the audience wants and not always what we want to do, Matt.
I know we were talking about captions a second ago. I think we're being captioned right now if anybody's watching this on Facebook. Is that possible?
Yeah. The Facebook Live will auto-generate captions. Now, those aren't necessarily going to be accurate. I don't know if it's properly interpreting my Boston accent, for example.
It's wicked close.
Instead of David, it just says Matt Damon, and then whatever you're saying.
Goodwill Hunting.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Like them
Those apples?
Yeah.
Other reasons why we should transcribe a show?
SEO. So Matt has hit on it, more times than we can count. You have to have a website for your podcast. And you'll notice that in your hosting site, which is different from your website, the hosting is where you're actually uploading each episode. The episode description, you can't fit an entire transcript in there. And even then, SEO crawlers and websites like Google are pulling from the episode title rather than what's normally in your description, something we've found out in the recent past. And if you're going to have a website, which you should, then you should probably have a transcription of your episode, because Google will pull your transcript for SEO purposes. And what better way than having the entire episode written out and having that boost your website up when people search for your guest, the company they work for, the 10 or 12 different topics that you talked about, books that were mentioned, websites, other podcasts, people. That's all boosting you up the rankings on your on Google or whatever search engine people are using to help more people find your website.
Forgive me for stating the obvious here, but this is what I tell my clients. To Johnny's point, Google can search text. Google hasn't yet been able to search audio. So you need a text version of your content for Google to find it for SEO. Catherine, I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's right. And also, if you find people who in your audience who do want the transcript, that can be a great email opt-in. So if you have an email list, which you should have an email list, that's a great little gimme for people who want to get on your list if they are interested in getting that transcript.
I think Apple's crawling the audio. They're already pulling keywords in order to categorize shows. I think Dan Meisner found that a few months ago. So I think at some point Google's going to be doing the same thing and creating their own transcripts and then using that to figure the whole thing out.
Well, as we all know, Google tends to lag behind Apple in the world of podcasting.
I have do you want to keep going on SEO, Matt? I have a different
Nope, keep going.
Okay, well, another reason to explore the world of transcription is maybe it's an obvious one, I don't know, but editing. It makes editing your podcast a heck of a lot easier. If you're working with someone, say you have a guest on your show, the guest calls the next day and say, I want to take out the part about when I talked about how much I love my dog because my dog just died. That's terrible. That's a really dark example. I don't know why I thought that. But let's say something like that, and oh, geez, I got to get that part out. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to find that without having to search through. I don't remember when he said that. You can keyword search for the name of the dog or whatever. And, I was producing a podcast last week, and there was an expert talking about generative AI, and he kept saying genitive AI. And finally I stopped and I said, I don't mean to tell you your business, but I think you're saying genitive AI instead of generative. He said, I am. Oh, man. And so I said, don't worry about it. Just say it right from now on. I was able to do a search and replace with the audio of the way the word was supposed to be pronounced. Oh. So
I suppose it's better than genital AI.
Yeah.
Read my mind.
That's a different podcast. Yeah.
That sort of brings me to the intersection, though, of transcriptions and editing. Is anybody using Descript to do that?
Yes, I love it.
I think we all are. Yeah.
I mean, so editing and transcription are kind of coming together in that facet.
Yeah, that's why I continue to use Descript, even though it is not the most super accurate transcription tool, but it gets up there to around 90% probably, but it's just such a time saver when you're looking to cut out certain language, or move things around. And for those who haven't used Descript, there are some useful tools. You can search for a host of filler words. I usually do take out the ums and uhs with one click of the mouse. And so, you do have to be careful you're not like cutting anything that shouldn't be cut, but it's a fantastic time saver, I found.
What I find about Descript is that it has for long podcasts where you need to take big chunks out, where you need to take out whole sections of audio or move it around. It's fantastic for that. And I just interrupted everybody again. I'm sorry.
I would like to now do a dramatic reenactment of every single time a new transcription service comes into the realm of the podcast Super Friends. Super Friends, guess what? I learned about a new transcription service. The rest of the Super Friends, oh my gosh, tell us all about it. How is it going? It's pretty good. It works at about, I would say, 90%. The rest of the Super Friends nod knowingly. It seems like we've all had the same transcription issues. They come on strong. We try them out. We get to that nice, juicy AI 90%, and we all either need to do human tweaks or some sort of correction that we know that's going to come up every single time, and we're all just right there, right at that 90%. It just can't get to that 100%, and especially if you have any kind of dialect, like David was saying before, any sort of accent or jargon or terminology that's specific to an industry, it rarely can catch up on those things. But so we're all just right at that 7 scene.
90, excellent. We'll give you a round of applause for that.
Thank you.
90% sounds high, but that means there's a mistake in every sentence, unless do the math right. But if you, I've noticed that Descript is the most powerful tool for the melding of transcription and editing. But if you go to a different service, we can mention them. Maybe we all will. I do pay for a service called Trint, Trint, and it is just noticeably more accurate. And it will put in things like if someone laughs, it'll pick that up and it'll put in a bracket laughter or laugh or something like that. And when you see that, it's like, oh, good. So now it knew when someone was laughing and didn't just try to make up a word or something. So I wish Descript would up its game in terms of accuracy. Or I wish one of these other services would turn into a robust editing tool, but that's maybe you guys have different experiences. I don't know.
David, I've heard that Trint is very good. It is quite pricey, though, isn't it?
Yep. Well, I don't recall off the top of my head how much it costs, but yes, you pay for it.
Counterpoint, maybe we should keep it at the 90% so that then it doesn't take over and destroy all of civilization. That's just also another thought.
Well, I have seen some podcasts where you'll see the transcript of the show posted on a website, and it'll say, this is generated by a transcription service. Please know that it might not be 100% accurate. And if you're putting it up there for SEO purposes, then 95% is really just fine. But but there are some people you're going to work with that want every word, spot on accurate.
Yeah. Another kind of way that I'm using it is I have some clients that I'm working with that rather than posting videos like short clips to promote the podcast on social media, we're turning them into like kind of quote graphics. So we're pulling like really interesting things that people can read. So if you're consuming something on Twitter or Instagram, rather than scrolling by and seeing another podcast video, you see, oh, this is 6 sentences of a really interesting piece of dialogue from an episode. And the transcript can be really helpful in pulling that. So you can search by keyword, whether it's entrepreneurship, business, investing. That's the space that I play in. So those are just the words that come to my mind. And then you can pull that text, put it into Figma or Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop, make a really cool quote graphic card that's engaging and bright. And that's another way that we're using the transcripts.
Jag, what do you use for transcripts? Descript?
So I use Descript when I generate one through AI. The service that I use that pays actual people to do it is called Go Transcript, which was recommended to me by a guest of one of my podcast clients. It was the dean of a medical school somewhere, and said, "This is the one I use for lectures, and it's probably 99% accurate."
Another thing Descript has to sort of put a little shine on your transcripts, or really your podcasts, is there are stock voices, really robotic voiceover artists, some better than others, but they give you about a dozen different voices you can choose from. Literally type the text in, and it's good for if you need a quick way to create an opening to a segment. You know, it says, now let's check the mailbag, something like that. Now that'll sound fine. If it's anything, you know, super long, the listener will realize it's a robot. And you can create your own virtual voice as well if you read a script and then type in, and you have mixed results there, but it's the scary world of artificial intelligence.
Have you tried that, Dave?
Yeah, I have. Which, my own voice?
Yes.
Yeah, and I've used it if I've voiced something over in the past and like I have to insert a couple words for some reason that the client is requesting, it can often work pretty well. But if you were, you know, this comes in handy if you're not near a microphone or anything, and your only option is to talk into your crappy laptop microphone. But if you needed to say something like, on today's show, we'll be talking with Janet Smith, who's CEO of blah, blah, blah. It probably is not going to be great because it won't pick up all the correct intonations and sort of your usual cadence and flow of your speaking style. That may improve over time. But I've used the robot ones. The first choice they give you sounds a lot like the guy that used to do the voiceover for every movie of the 80s, you know? In a world.
In a world.
That guy, that's what it sounds like. So you can have fun with it, you know, if you want. It works if it's kind of a light segment, you know.
I have to say, David, you're hearing you do that demonstration with your voice was the very first time I'd ever heard it generate the voice for you, and I remember I had chills because it was sort of like there was something uncanny valley for me about hearing your voice, you know, your voice generated just out of nowhere. And I remember thinking like, okay, as a human being, I can tell this is not a human speaking, but it was a little too close for comfort. So there's been a couple moments with the AI. There's a couple of Boston Dynamic robots that I've seen where I'm like, okay, I feel it in the fiber of my humanness, but that was one of the moments where I was like, oh, this is just getting started. It's going to be going somewhere pretty soon. That's going to be interesting times for sure.
I mean, is there a lawyer in the house? Like, should we be changing the words of our clients after they record something? Do I need to get a waiver signed? Is there a lawyer around here?
That's a good idea.
The way that the script I think is getting around any legal issue is you have to read a script that takes you about 10 to 15 minutes to read. And so because of that, at least through the script, you're not able to generate a robot of someone else, right? So because that would be even scarier. But I'm sure that's coming too. But you don't want a case where, you know, you could literally say, hey, I interviewed Tom Cruise this morning, and here's what he had to say, and you could make Tom Cruise say anything you want. But so but again, it's so far it's useful, but it's coming. It's crazy.
I use Otter, and I think Otter's one of the first ones to get in on this. It's otter.ai if you'd like to check it out. A few $100s, does a really good job, but something that is an absolute I must have. And I've been shopping for a transcription service for quite a long time, is the separation of speakers is an absolute must. And Headliner, I love Headliner. You don't separate the speakers. Is it just me, or is that sort of form of transcription completely useless if you don't separate the speakers?
Yeah, if you don't know who's saying what, yeah. I think Headliner's trying to get better at that. Adobe does that in Adobe Premiere. They can generate a transcript from not in Audition yet, the audio, but in Premiere, the video. Yes.
And Jag, you had a hack with Microsoft.
So this was actually I have to give credit where credit is due. The Podcast Editors Mastermind sponsored a show notes summit a couple weekends ago, and I've been catching up on the seminars. I didn't watch it live, and there was actually a blind couple that talked about the importance of accessibility in podcasting. They showed screen readers and how those work. And one of the tools they use when it came to transcription to cover those who are hard of hearing is the newer version of Microsoft Word, not the standalone, but the one that's more focused online and lives online in the cloud. has a transcription service where you can upload audio to it and it will generate the text from it. And I believe it will separate speakers as well, Matt. So I don't have the newest version of Word, so I haven't had a chance to play with it. But if any of our listeners or anybody in the call does have the newest online version of Word, that is a new bell/whistle that they have offered.
Does anybody have any insight? I think, Matt, you might have a little insight on this. When we are talking about these different services, how different are they? Are they all, is it one company that's being used under different brand names? Is it one sort of brain that's doing all of this, or are there literally all these multiple companies that are competing with each other?
I think they're borrowing. So we discovered, I think the last time we spoke, I don't know if it was our group meeting or in the podcast Super Friends, that it was Descript was taking the transcription from Otter.
Yes, I believe they told us that at Podcast Movement last year. We talked about that on our private call, the 5 of us. Yep.
Yeah, and you had mentioned a fault in it, Jag, where if the next person starts talking, the first word is left behind with the last speaker.
Yes.
And you had mentioned that as a fault for Descript, and I've noticed it in Otter as well. So those two are together. Headliner, I know, takes from Google. So yeah, they're kind of all borrowing from one another. And I think there's probably an API that a company can go into and just use transcription. I mean, it's simple. This is why we have so many companies like Riverside now jumping into, hey, we've got transcription. And who's our Riverside person here? Is that you, Johnny?
Yes. And we went through the Riverside transcription tool in our private call, and the words that it did capture were accurate. However, there was a lot that it didn't capture, and it would just show up as a waveform. So I think it was even less than what you would get on a Descript or any number one of these other services. So I think in terms of ranking all of these services, I would put Riverside Transcription specifically probably at the bottom.
Interesting.
Matt, do you want me to play an example of the robot Dave talking through Descript?
Yeah, why not? We got lots of time today.
Okay. This is Robot Dave coming to you from Boston. I just got done recording my own podcast with the Robot Superfriends. I hope this doesn't freak Catherine out too much. And now here's the guy who sounds like the movie trailer.
In a world where podcasters need help, look to the 5 heroes who control the information. The Podcast Superfriends. We are super. We are podcasters. We are your friends.
There you go.
That's good.
That's what our radio folks call pukey. Hey now, 12 in a row next.
For sure.
That's funny.
How's the accuracy? Because I think at 90%, it doesn't feel like it's good enough.
It's not. I think 90% is somewhat embarrassing. I mean, if one of us were to provide that to a client, they would notice right away that it's so. But again, I think it depends on your use for the transcript. Now, I produce some podcasts for financial entities, and they need to run it through compliance.
Right.
And for them, I try to get it as accurately as possible because this is like a legal issue, and so you don't want to miss a word and trip up. But I'd love to live in a world. Oh, here I go. I'd love to live in a world where where it was just sort of accepted that most transcripts are going to be in the 90 to 95% range for the purposes of something like SEO, because I think it gets the job done, and it's but it's all a matter of time and resources. I mean, you can outsource your transcript to, and Johnny, maybe you do this. I know you outsource certain things to people overseas.
Yeah,
he's very mysterious that way.
Yeah, so. I have two people currently that do things for me. So basically, what I have them do is I have both of them on Otter. So I bought them Otter subscriptions, and then what their job is to proofread it for me. So I've cut out that time of taking back the AI transcript that I could pay someone to say, hey, make a transcript of this, and they could just run it through Otter without telling me and send it to me, and then I'd be like, oh, this isn't perfect, let me go through and fix it. But that's what I pay them for, is fixing up the transcriptions as best as possible. And granted, there's a language barrier. I have a guy in Pakistan doing stuff, and fluency in English was part of the deal when I hired him, and I would say he does 98-99% accuracy. And granted, we are talking, some of these business podcasts have crazy terms like a SOFR curve. I don't know what that is. It's SOFR. It's some kind of real estate thing. But I don't expect him to know stuff like that. And then I have a girl over in Greece that's been working for me for several years, and she's from America, but she lives overseas now, and she does a fantastic job as well. And what is a big differentiator that they're providing as well is I have them go through and bold every time the host asks a question. So if any of these clients are going to turn these transcripts into blog posts or use them for anything else, they can easily depict between who the speaker is and when a new part of the episode starts. So it's like a visual cue of a time code.
And proper nouns are a big thing, right? Because I do certain sports podcasts, and when I use Headliner to create those audiograms, and if there's like a baseball coach on, he starts naming all of his players. And this guy, Billy Ray O'Flanstein or whatever. That's the bad example. But
he's Irish and Jewish, David.
He's everything. That's why the transcription service had problems with it. But like if he starts running off, I start to cringe. I'm like, oh God. And I'm going to have to look up the spelling of all of these people. I hope I can find them on Google, because Lord knows that Headliner is not going to know how to spell unusual names, So another thing to look out for. And that's something people are going to care about. Obviously, if the person in question is actually looking at it, they want their name spelled correctly.
I love the compliance aspect of the whole thing. I also think it's great that Don LaFontaine has come up twice in this show with the In a World.
Yeah.
I think we'd also like to have Morgan Freeman narrate the transcript of all of our shows. That would be...
that's the guy.
The Snoop Dogg option as well. That's always a good one.
Isn't he in Waze or GPS? Somebody's GPS.
Yo,
now,
subscribe to this mother effing podcast.
Get Samuel L. Jackson to do it. There you go.
I had Shaquille O'Neal take me through Italy on Waze.
Wow. You can get pasta over there. And you could get pizza over there.
It's not Papa John's.
Are you hungry for pasta?
So I guess another thing if I look back at the root of transcriptions, the only transcription you could ever get was from public television or public radio about 25 years ago. And at the end of the show, for a complete transcript of this show, send $3.99 in a self-addressed stamped envelope to your local PBS station.
Okay, so Johnny, a self-addressed stamped envelope. Sorry.
Oh, God.
Is that what these paper bills come in the mail?
All right. So, I guess what about the cost of it? Does anybody find it too much? It's nice when it's built into Riverside. It's nice if you don't need to have speakers separated in the whole thing. I think it's great to be able to send it off to a client so they can find the part that they want. Hey, can you isolate that part for a clip?
Yeah.
Or something like that. But what is as of right now, I'm new to podcasting. Tell me which one to use and why I should use it.
I think Jack, you pay way too much. I think $1 a minute is way too expensive. If we're talking a 90-minute podcast, $90 for a fully edited transcription. Let's say 3 people are hard of hearing that listen to your podcast that get 1,000 downloads an episode. Like, I don't think you're getting a sufficient return on your investment into that. Granted, long term, you have perfect transcripts for all 800 episodes of your podcast. That's great, but I would outsource it to a person overseas. I have found that to be the cheapest, least expensive option. I think I pay my guy in Pakistan, I pay him like $20 starting at like an hour. So if it's at an hour, it's like $20. And if it gets to an hour and a half, I give him like 25.
Also, if you need a new pair of sneakers, Johnny knows where to get them.
Yeah, but hey, people shit on, and I'm not saying you're doing this, Jack, but people shit on hiring people overseas. What I'm paying this guy, he'd be making $3 an hour doing manual labor outside. I'm asking him to do something that requires significantly less labor intensive from his end, and he's getting quadruple what he normally would be making. So I would call that a win-win on both sides.
To that point, Johnny, and Catherine was kind enough to recommend a transcript proofreader to me through Fiverr that was also overseas. Yeah. That did the transcript. I sent it off to her. She corrected it, but there were some mistakes. And for what I was paying her, to have an actual human do it. And then what I like about Go Transcript is they actually promote that they have native English speakers doing it, whether they're in England or Australia or Canada or the US. And so for me to spend a few more bucks to be able to sort of quote unquote set it and forget it is worth it to me. Sure. I have some clients that are on, a la carte plans that will pay for the actual transcript. I have some clients that pay me a full boat to handle all the production and handle everything. And then I include the transcript in that higher rate for them. So it depends on what you need. But I think what's the key here is if you're a client and you are hiring any of the 5 of us to work on your podcast, you don't want to worry about the nuts and bolts of this thing. You just want to say, Catherine, Johnny, Matt, Dave, handle this for me. So I think what we're talking to here with the ins and outs of all the transcription stuff is probably for more the DIY podcaster who's, knows they have to get a transcript up.
By the way, I didn't know. Of course, I didn't know how much I pay Trent, but now I know because I just looked it up. But it's I pay $75 a month, and I probably use it at least 10 times a month, sometimes more. I like the luxury of not worrying about whether it's going to be there or not getting hit with a bunch. I used to use a service called Temi, Temi, which is pretty good, pretty accurate. And 90%. That was probably 95, but whatever. But with that, I remember that if it was short, like on the 15 to 20 minutes side, you'd probably only pay like $5 to $7. And if it was like an hour long, you might pay as much as $13 to $15 for the transcript. So, to me, it's the cost of doing business. And yes, certain clients, I'm charging them for the transcript. So it's fine for me, but, make your own call.
Dave, on Trent, was that unlimited for that monthly fee, or was there a limit on how much you could use?
I'm pretty sure it's unlimited.
Good to know.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea to go and find somebody reputable, like a Trent, a Temi, Otter, Descript, because I got stuck in some fly-by-night stuff and companies that actually disappeared and got sold halfway through. And, one of the things, instead of, I will just want to mention, because I wanted to go back to this question about optimizing transcriptions for SEO. So I thought that, at least I was told, which is always a big mistake in podcasting, that if I just copied and pasted the entire transcription into the show note or into the episode page on my website, that Google would list it as being too long to read and wouldn't, mark it into the 3 or 4 minutes that they wanted people to do.
What scumbag told you that?
I don't know, but I'm dumb for believing it. And maybe it was true at one point, but maybe it's not true anymore. Maybe Google is smart enough to actually recognize the transcription. So this one company, Podin, you can embed the podcast as a widget into the website. And I thought that was pretty good until the company disappeared and got sold and went broke. And then the mechanism broke. And then my websites had this big box of nothing, which was supposed to be the transcriptions that disappeared from the website. So be careful who you get involved with. And then I gave my money to a second company called Avrio, Avrio, which really I think was dealing more with like companies and groups like medical groups or people who did interviews or seminars. Anyway, they were from Cyprus. That thing went broke last week. So there I was with my second company. And so I feel like I've kind of been throwing my money down the drain. And if I were to add up all the transcription money I've peeled off this year, it's probably close to $700 or $800.
Jeepers.
So get somebody reputable that's been in the business, in the game for a long time, that comes recommended. Don't be like me and try to go chasing something that you think might be the new and innovative thing, because there's a lot of fraud out there.
Can I share sort of just hearing that tale, Matt? One of the things I think is frustrating for me about transcription is that it seems necessary, but it doesn't seem major. And again, not to diminish anybody who relies on them as that's their way for getting a podcast episode. I'm not trying to take anything away from that at all, but it's hard to spend this much time and money and effort to make something so perfect and branded and ready for public consumption. And the impact is just not that great. So it seems so disproportional, the amount of time and money and effort that we have to talk about and think about these things. And it always seems like it's not the thing that's moving the needle, at least for my clients. Again, I know some people really appreciate it, and there are reasons to have it, but this is exactly, this is a lot. We're starting to talk about hundreds and hundreds of dollars. The average hobbyist podcaster or somebody who's just getting started, they're not going to have that kind of time and effort. They should be spending their time and effort doing so many other things to make their podcast strong. So I always, whenever we talk about transcripts, it always feels just very necessary evil in a way for me.
Yeah.
It feels icky.
There's an ick factor.
Yeah. I mean, a successful podcast, we'll call it 5-digit downloads. It could be 4-digit downloads. That's thousands of people. And how many people are going to touch the transcript? One hand or two hands?
3 or 0.
Zeros.
Yeah.
I had one request for a transcript in 350 episodes of the Sound Off podcast, and it was one person who was hard of hearing. That's one request. Now, I don't know if I should be doing this for the SEO and how much that really does benefit the SEO, but yet I still feel compelled to do a transcript every week and keep up with
the Joneses of
the
podcasting.
Joneses.
Yeah.
And
yet we've cranked out 40 minutes on this topic alone.
Yeah, well, some people are going to want to. I mean, every one of our clients, I think, asks about it at some point.
Sorry, Jack, we cut you off.
No, it's fine. I was going to say the college podcast I did for my college radio station's 50th anniversary. We have an alum who is deaf. In fact, when he was a radio DJ, he went by Deaf Jeff on the air. He was born 90% hearing loss, I think it was. And I remember when I spoke to him and I interviewed him for the podcast, he actually thanked me for doing transcripts of the podcast because he doesn't always catch everything when he's listening to a podcast. And so this project that I've done about 100 episodes in or so. And yeah, it's time to hand edit all these transcripts because it's not a moneymaker for me. It's a passion project. And every time I'm like, I don't think I feel like doing the transcript. Well, Jeff might want to see it. I think of Jeff. And Jeff's a really good guy. And the fact that he went out of his way to thank me for doing it as an individual who's hard of hearing, that really resonated with me. And the SEO. And I'll bring it full circle. Def Jeff and his day job actually works on SEO, so he's got both.
We need to have him come weigh in on this then.
Well, we'd have to write out what we're saying on whiteboards. Jeff, what do you think of SEO?
He reads lips.
Okay.
In fact, he's a great follow on Twitter during a Syracuse basketball game because when Jim Boeheim was the coach, he would post whatever Jim Boeheim was saying in the huddle.
So I think a lot of the transcription that gets done, there's an AI component to it in some facet or another. So I want to talk a little bit about, because we talk about the transcription toys that are all out there. There's also a lot of AI toys that have come to the front that will do your clips, that will reels and shorts and all that stuff. So what's been your experience? Yeah, what's been your show notes too. So what's been your experience so far?
Anyone, Bueller. So I can talk about this extensively, so please cut me off if I get on too much of a soapbox, but I did a 4-part series on my Substack about AI uses in podcasting, and I'll make it very high level. Essentially what I did is I broke up AI and podcasting into 2 sections of what it's currently being used for. There's production and then there's content. Within production, ultimately the argument is that as far as AI has progressed, we're still in the infancy right now. But in terms of production versus content, it is much more helpful in production. And the 2 within production, I highlighted Descript and I highlighted Isotope RX as tools that you can use, and then some plugins here and there that people can use. But essentially, in terms of speeding up the turnaround process of your podcast, AI is really helpful, whether it's using Descript to transcribe out your podcast so that you can edit, whether it's using Isotope RX or a number of other plugins that will actually listen to your audio and give you recommendations to help reduce plosives, de-essing, reducing reverb or echo, background noise removal, things like that. It's really, really powerful. So you don't have to go in and actually learn these things yourself. So this really applies more to producers or people that are working on either on their own podcasts or producers who are doing what we do and working with clients. If you want to be able to create really great sounding podcasts, you need to utilize some of these AI tools. Then I moved over into the content side of things versus where it's actually using AI to come up with content for your podcast or using AI to repurpose content for your podcast. So the two companies that I highlighted within that are the two tools. One of them was ChatGPT. ChatGPT can be really, really helpful, or it can be really, really lackluster. And that all depends on your level of input. If you're using ChatGPT to help come up with ideas for your podcast, you have to be very, very detailed. Use that whole limit of the input that you can type in. This is exactly what my podcast is about. This is exactly what I'm looking to do with it. And the example that I used for ChatGPT was that I think the first input I put on the Substack post was, I have an entrepreneurship podcast. I need to do 10 episodes. Give me 10 topics. And it gave me 10 really, basic topics, and that anybody would look at and go, oh, it's kind of clickbaity. I don't want to do that. Then I contradicted that with a much more detailed input, which was, I need to do a 10 episode series. I'm using no guests. All of these need to be built around the idea of what it takes to become a successful entrepreneur. And I need all of these 10 episodes to connect to each other. And I need you to explain to me what each episode is going to be about and how they connect to each episode to create its own series, so that someone could listen to all 10 of these episodes and nothing else and still get a really big takeaway from it. And it gave me this huge breakdown of everything that you as a podcaster could take. And so all of that's available on the Substack. You can read it all for free. And then the final one I put out, which is what we've just been talking about, I'd be curious on your thoughts, is a company called, let me pull up the post. It was called Momentum.fm. And so what Momentum.fm does is it takes your, oh man, I can't even pull it up. Essentially what it does is it takes your RSS feed or it takes your YouTube channel. And the first problem that sticks out to me here is that it's only taking stuff that's already published. So for one of the tools that it offered was, oh, here's a bunch of title suggestions. Well, that doesn't mean anything to me. The episode is already out. Why would I change the title after the fact? That doesn't help me at all. The other one was, here the AI will transcribe out the episode. That's great. Then it will go in even further and say, here are segments that the AI thinks would be useful for videos, and we can even create videos beyond that. So Momentum does all of that stuff and kind of just goes deeper and deeper and deeper to help create content from stuff that you've already put out. And then the final thing that I thought was funny was it said, oh, we can highlight people and links that were mentioned in the podcast. And so the episode that I highlighted on the Substack was between two men, and it said, oh, here's a suggestion. Here's a story about the guest as a daughter and her hardworking. So it thought that the guest was a girl. And so that clearly is not going to be helpful to anybody. And then the other one was, oh, we've highlighted all these people and links. One of them was URBS. I've never heard of that person. So a lot of these tools are really, really new and fresh and are still building to become better and better. And I'm sure that they will over time. But in terms of whether you're using AI to help speed along the turnaround of an episode or help create extra content, I would focus much more on the former.
Momentum. Oh, sorry. Johnny, is it the website actually momentum.fm? Because that's not coming up for me for some reason.
I got a fault too.
Yeah.
Studio.momentum.fm.
There you go.
Well, I was going to say to Johnny's point about ChatGPT. Well, you guys are pulling that up. What was interesting to me was also in that show notes summit, there was a section on creating show notes from ChatGPT. So what was interesting about it, because there's a character input limit, the person doing the demonstration actually broke the show into 4 chunks, took the transcript, write a summary of chunk 1, of chunk 2, chunk 3, chunk 4. And then it took the 4 generated summaries and he put all that in together. And then it gave show notes on the entire show. There are other services out there that I've been playing with. None really stick out to me more than another, but Pod Squeeze is one. Capsho, CAPSHO, and Swell.ai. What they will do is for various prices, and I haven't spent a lot of time with them, you can upload your audio. It will generate a transcript and or show notes. So it can theoretically do both for you and handle a lot of that post-production for you. And from the little bit I've played with, not a bad start. I can write better show notes as a human being than the AI
That's
can.
the key.
But it might give me a start, or it might give me, okay, well, that's not a bad summary. I can add and tweak from here. But I think that's where we are with a lot of the AI. It's a good start, and it might save some time, but you need a human as a gatekeeper for most of it.
It's
For sure.
memento, not momentum. Memento.
Okay.
Ah.
That explains it why I still wasn't able to find. John, Jag, excellent points, because AI is, it can be powerful. It can be a great thing. It can be a great time saver, but so far it's a tool, coming up with, and Johnny, maybe you said it, like, coming up with 10, I have some podcasters I work with that say, I don't have time to put together a list of questions for this guest. Can you help me? And so, I would always say fewer questions are usually better, but nevertheless, if you punch that into, for a forensic accountant who deals with corporations in the construction industry, give me 10 interesting questions to ask them in an interview, and they'll give it to you. ChatGPT will do it for you. They're not necessarily great questions, but if you have a little bit of writer's block or whatever, it could possibly save a ton of time for you.
That's essentially what I said. Is it's not the end all be all, but it will help get the gears turning in your head, so you can take what they give you and then kind of add the human touch to it.
I used to think I still think writing show notes is a pain in the ass. I think when we write show notes, we want to write them for Google more than we write them for people. I know that's sad to say, but it's the truth. But I really like what Otter does here. This is an episode that's coming out tonight for the Sound Off podcast. But on the and I believe this counts as a form of AI, and that's a little bit of a summary. Here's what you spoke about throughout your show, and I think it's now I remember. I did ask that question. Okay, I will put that in the show notes, and so I find that sort of form of AI to be kind of helpful when I'm doing show notes. So anyway, just what I see in all.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Great example. The thing. Now I'm forgetting who said it. I guess it was you, Jag. The having to split a transcript into 4 parts. It's already giving me a headache. Is there a paid version of ChatGPT where you could put in a whole...
Dave, that's where these other ones come in that specialize in podcasts, where you can either upload the audio or the transcript. The 3, again, that I know of are Swell.ai, CapShow, and Pod Squeeze that I have in my email.
So I've played with all 3 of those, Jag.
Please.
And they do a great job of giving you the transcript, and kind of what they pitch as their value add is the content repurposing it. So I one of them, I think it was CapShow or Pod, I think it was CapShow, was like, oh, well, if you want to do a social media post, you click this, and here's a bunch of generated headlines and generated episode descriptions specifically for LinkedIn, and then an email newsletter, and you can drag and drop different pieces of content. The problem that I ran into, and the reason I canceled all of the subscriptions to all of those, is it's all clickbait. It's all very much like, not even just writing it for Google, it's writing it for like the 12-year-old on YouTube that's looking for Minecraft hacks. And it's like, it is just this most vanilla, just any person with a functioning prefrontal cortex is going to look at that and go, either a robot wrote that, or it's something that is just so Ty Lopez-y that I don't even want to click on it. And it's just, I was very unimpressed by all of it, but I'm not saying I'm all out on AI. I think it's just, I think I've made the comparison that it's like where we are with Teslas now at the stage of AI, we're at the horse and buggy stage of AI.
Yeah, you can do an interview podcast with, say, an interior decorator and punch it into one of those, and it comes up with a proposed audiogram or clip from the pod, and the headline will say, "The shocking truth about your bathroom is revealed by this interior decorator." And meanwhile, your interior decorator didn't say anything shocking at all, but this is where it's aiming.
I have a counter example that I think is actually helpful. I know I've mentioned within our group that headlines have always been or titles have been a struggle for me. And I started using from CoSchedule the headline analyzer. So this is like the titles of things. And I have to say, so I've been using this program for a year. It has been very helpful to sort of teach me what Google and other search engines are looking for in a non-clickbaity way of what they're looking for in questions. I've learned a lot about how to think in questions because the search engines are trying to answer questions. So back to Matt's example, and even Johnny with your getting your transcribers to highlight and bold the questions, starting to think about the internet is trying to answer questions. If you're thinking in questions, you can start marrying those two things together. And as I was using the headline analyzer, learning more about what is considered to be good SEO in those headlines. And I have to say, Johnny, you were saying, what good does it do for us to change the titles of past episodes? There's one client of mine where we're actually considering changing some of the titles to make them a little bit more optimized because, as we all know, podcasts have legs. And it's been sort of interesting to start thinking about I'll switch gears a little bit and say, as I'm putting into these headlines, proposing them in the headline analyzer, it's pleasing to me to be getting these great SEO scores and these great headline scores right off the bat, which teaches me okay, I've learned how to sort of think in the words, the word choice and the phrasing in a way that's going to be SEO friendly. But anyway, we do have a client that we're thinking about changing some of the titles, not for clickbait purposes, but because there's good content there and we want people to connect to it. And so if we're able to get titles that are bringing people in and bringing listeners in, that might be worth it for us to just kind of as an experiment with some of these older episodes.
It's a fascinating case study, Catherine. I'd be curious to see if you got a boost in downloads on previous episodes after you do that.
We're in the thinking stage right now. So
I like that. The ability to go in and just change all the headlines, the titles of the episode, and going right back to the beginning, and you probably get an SEO boost off all that.
But let me stress that I not clickbait, but it's been a very good lesson for me to just learn what is being looked for. And now specifically the tool that I use, they now have an AI feature, so you can ask the AI what's another way of writing this headline, and just seeing what some of the options are. Some of them are totally inappropriate. They're for the Minecrafters, but then other ones they're right on the money, or it's like, oh, that's a great way of saying the exact same thing I was trying to say. So I don't know. For all the fears that I have about AI, there are some benefits too. But yeah, there you go. And then I found $10. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to say, I might have missed it. Did you mention what service that was, Catherine? Because I know you've talked about that one before.
Yeah, it's CoSchedule is the company, and then they have a headline analyzer. That's the tool that I use.
CoSchedule. Okay. Yeah.
Is that a program or is that a Chrome extension?
It is a website on the internet. They probably have an extension, I'm sure, but I just go right to
mailer.
there. Yes, it is a paid service, but I have found it for all the copywriting I do. Because show notes, I enjoy writing the show notes. It's been extremely helpful.
Matt's not allowed to sign up given his track record. As soon as he puts in his
It'll go out of
card,
business.
the company goes out of business.
Oh yeah, do not jinx this one for me, Matt. Let me see if I have let me see if there's a
company
code.
Black Plague.
Let me see if they'll give me a bump for putting you in touch with that. Okay.
Oh, it's great. I mean, maybe I'm disappointed all the time because I expect these things to perform as well as I can, and none of them really do. It's to Johnny's. Yeah, well,
I've used it for already a year. I've used it a year, so I've used it for a whole year, and I've already signed up for the second year. So just again, and if they go out of business,
for the listeners, she's been using this for a year. She told us about it a month ago.
How dare you, Johnny?
Hiding it from us.
How dare you? You just remembered I talked about it a month ago.
Yeah, Catherine's the type when you go to see the band. She's like, I was here when they were playing like bars.
Yeah. all those nights I told you we couldn't hang out. I was going to see them. I didn't want you guys to know.
I have their first album, which was a demo reel, which I bought out of somebody's trunk. So yeah,
on cassette.
Yeah.
So if we mentioned anything in this show, any form of service, I'm going to make sure that it hits the show notes. I won't bother with getting the prices. People can go and find that themselves. But whatever services got mentioned will go in the show notes of this episode. And the way we're going to find out is we're going to get a transcript of the episode. I'm going to put a self-addressed stamped envelope for $3.99 to the Sound Off Media Company. I'll send myself a transcript, and then we're going to find out exactly what was said in the entire show.
And then have AI write the show notes for you, Matt.
Yeah.
That's right. Actually,
have
it's only going to
a
be
very
it's only going to be
snappy
90%
headline.
accurate, and all the websites we mentioned are going to be screwed up. It's
5
gonna be
podcast
momentum,
super
not
friends
momentum.
tell you the horrible things you're doing wrong on your podcast.
The shocking
We'll get
truth.
90%. 90% will be correct, and our title is going to be amazing.
Why 90% transcription rate sucks.
And what you can do
I-
about it.
I mean, listen, I know we kind of thought, are we going to be able to get an hour out of this? And it turns out we did. We did get an hour out of transcript and show notes and a little bit of AI. Is it change? Is what we spoke about here going to change the way you do anything?
Yes. For me, I've been taking down all these time savers, and just in the spirit of what we talked about, I'm going to check out Catherine's. I'm going to join Catherine's cult because, it more and more. I don't know about you guys. It's not going away. The fact that we have to. I hate writing show notes too. It's a pain in the neck. But if there are quick ways to do it and effective ways to do it, that's one thing. So for me.
All right. I'm still going to continue to subscribe to things and put companies out of business.
David, we've reached the end of the episode. Can you please do your obligatory plug of your music podcast? I don't want to break that streak.
Oh, well, since you asked, in the most recent episode of Past Tense, the Top 10 Time Machine, we took the time machine back to 1979 to consider the top 10 albums this week in 1979. TimeMachinePod.com. Thank you, Johnny.
You're welcome.
Rock on.
Round we go. Say goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Please go read my AI series on Substack, substack.com/JohnnyPodcasts.
Anybody else want to put anything in the show notes?
Well, yeah, I'm going to find out if there is a promo code for me or something, an affiliate for the co-schedule.
You totally deserve to have one.
Yes.
Valid for everybody except Matt Kundle.
Sorry, no Canada.
Full price.
Oh, no.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.